Sadhu. May my most venerable homage be to my venerable teacher, Pinvat Lukswami Namaste. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya. Welcome to today's Sutta class. So you all are very fortunate that you get to listen to our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha's purest Dhamma that was born from the heart of the Supreme Buddha. So you must realize that this is an opportunity that we have not gotten very often in this samsara. Okay, it's very rarely that Buddhas appear into this world. And it's very rarely that a person gets a human life in this world. And it's very rarely that after having gotten a human life, a person gets to hear the teaching of a Buddha in this world. So we must, the Supreme Buddha explained, this is called an inopportune moment. So this moment is going to be lost very quickly. This is not going to be there forever. This is only there for a short time. This Dhamma is only going to shine for a little bit more time, and afterwards this Dhamma is not going to be heard in this world. This is the last era where this Dhamma of the Gautama Buddha is going to be heard in the human world. So you're very lucky and fortunate that at a time like this, at an era like this, where people are completely indulged by lust, by hatred, by delusion, you get to hear a teaching that teaches how to abandon lust, abandon hatred, abandon delusion. So you should really be happy about this opportunity that you have gotten, and you should make an effort to make use of this opportunity. Okay. So today we're going to be learning about a beautiful sutta where our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains the path to abandoning lust, the path to abandoning hatred, and path to abandoning delusion. This is just a very beautiful, a very simplified path, which is quite simplified for the sake of ourselves. The Supreme Buddha simplified this and taught the reality of how to develop the Dhammapada, the step-by-step process a person can practice in order to attain that state of Nibbana, that state of being free from desire, that state of being free from hatred, that state of being free from delusion. Okay, so this sutta is found in the Anguttara Nikaya of the Pali Canon, and the name of this sutta is called the Thayodhamma Sutta. Okay. Thayodhamma Sutta. Thayodhamma means the Supreme Buddha in this sutta teaches the step-by-step process of reaching Nibbana in factors of threes. That's why Thayo means three. Okay, in factors of three, the Supreme Buddha teaches a step-by-step process of how a person can develop this Dhammapada, what he needs to abandon in order to develop the Dhammapada. So when you read this sutta, when you listen to this sutta, you will realize how clear our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, was about this Dhammapada, about developing the Dhammapada. There was absolutely nothing that the Supreme Buddha did not understand in any way, in any aspect about the path to Nibbana. His understanding, his realization about the path to Nibbana was just absolutely amazing and impeccable. So you can really understand this when we learn this sutta. Okay. So I actually was not able to find a translation of this, but a translation online. But this Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation is what I'm going to be using to teach this sutta. So if you have the Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations of the book, then you will be able to read it. And this sutta is included in the book of tens. Okay, because there are 10 groups of those 3 factors. That's why it's included in the book of the tens. And okay, so in this sutta, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha teaches, so bhikkhus, if these 3 things were not found in this world, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, would not arise in this world. Okay, so if these 3 factors cannot be found in this world, a Tathagata would not appear into this world. And the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by him would not shine in the world. So then we can understand that the reason a Buddha appears into this world, the reason that a Buddha teaches the Dhamma to this world is because of these 3 things. Okay? So let's learn what these 3 things are. The Supreme Buddha explains, what are these 3? And they are birth, old age, and death. Okay, what are these 3 things? Birth, aging, and death. So if these 3 things are not found in this world, a Buddha would not appear into this world. And if Buddha does not appear into this world, of course, the Dhamma would not be taught into this world. Then we can realize that the reason that the Supreme Buddha teaches the Dhamma to us is for us to become free from being born, for us to be free from aging and death. Okay, because the Bodhisattva, the reason the Bodhisattva leaves home, renounces the world in order to become the Buddha is to find the path, to find the way to become free from aging, to become free from death, to be free from birth and this endless circle of birth and death. Okay, so that's the purpose of the appearance of a Buddha. If these 3 factors are not there, then a Buddha would not need to appear to this world to tell the people to find the way to become free from this. Okay? The Supreme Buddha explains, without having, now remember I told you in this sutta, the Supreme Buddha teaches the step-by-step process about how to become free from birth, how to become free from aging and death, how to reach Nibbana in factors of 3, in the step-by-step process of factors of 3. Okay, so the first factor, first 3 factors that we learned is the fact that there is something called aging, there's something called birth, aging, and death. Okay. So Supreme Buddha explains, without having abandoned these 3 things, one is incapable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. Okay. So unless a person abandons these 3 factors, a person cannot be free from birth, aging, and death. So this is very important. You should focus and listen well, because this completely tells you the answers that you're looking for. Okay, so if you also want to become free from this long journey of birth and death, if you want to be free from birth, if you want to be free from aging, if you want to be free from death, okay, the reason that we are suffering, the reason that we are aging, the reason that we are having to die is because we are born, right? If we were not born, then suffering from aging and death would not arise. So the Supreme Buddha explains, if a person wants to become free from these three things, then you need to abandon these three factors. So now let's learn what those three factors are. The Supreme Buddha explains what three, and they are lust, hatred, and delusion. So if a person wants to become free from birth, aging, and death, what does he need to abandon? He needs to abandon lust. He needs to abandon desire. He needs to abandon completely hatred. And he needs to abandon completely delusion. This Buddha explains, Ragakkayo, dosakkayo, mohakkayo, nibbana. That is what nibbana is. That is what being free from aging, death, and old age is. Okay, so in order to reach nibbana, a person needs to abandon these three things, that is lust, hatred, and delusion. Okay, and then the Supreme Buddha explains, because without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning lust, hatred, and delusion. Okay, so in order to become free from aging, in order to become free from birth, aging, and death, what you need to do, you need to abandon desire, hatred, and delusion. Okay, in order to abandon desire, hatred, and delusion, you need to abandon another three factors. Okay, what are those three factors? The Supreme Buddha explains those three factors are personal existence view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observances. So in Pali, we call this Sakkaya Ditti Vichikicha Silabbata Paramasa. Okay, Sakkaya Ditti means personal existence view. That is, thinking that there is someone called a me, a I, something called mind. That's a permanent entity that is in control of everything. Okay, so if a person has this view, the reason that we are going in this samsara is because we have this view. Because we take everything as me, mine, and I. Even our eyes, ears, nose, and tongue, we consider these to be mine. And we think that we can control these things the way we want. And even external things, we find everything to be, that's mine, that's my thing, that's mine, that belongs to me. So we're completely trapped in this view of me. Okay, that is called Sakkaya Ditti, personal existence. You're thinking that there is a person who controls everything inside. Okay, so now in a instinctual way, we kind of feel that, right? There's someone called me. I'm the one who controls everything. But really, if you look in to your eyes, who you consider to be yours, right? Your ears, the nose, and the tongue, and the body. When the eye is changing, when the eye is aging, can you say, no, don't let my eye age, may it be the same way as it is? Can you control it by demanding? No, you can't, right? When your ear, nose, tongue, and the body and the mind is aging, can you control it the way you want? You can't, right? So if a person understands that all of these things are impermanent, the eye, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body are impermanent. The forms, the feelings, the perceptions, the intentions, consciousness, all of these, if a person understand that all of these things are impermanent, then that person feels very much dispassion about these things. And if a person feels dispassion towards these things, would he ever grasp these things as me, mine, and I? No, right? The reason that the reason that we become attached to these six sense faculties and the five aggregates is because we think that we think that there is a me here. We think there is an I here that we can control the way we want. Okay, and we are attached to the gratification of it. And as long as we are attached to that gratification, as long as we have that attachment, then we think that we can control these things the way we want. Okay, so the way to abandon Sakkaya, the way to abandon this personal existent view is to always see the impermanence of these things. See how everything is changing. Okay, if something is always changing, the Supreme Buddha explains that leads to sorrow. Okay, when the eye is changing, when the eye is aging, when you can't control it, it leads to sorrow. And when it falls sick and when you cannot control it, it leads to sorrow. And the Supreme Buddha asks, if something is impermanent and if it's always changing, and if that leads to sorrow, then can you say that it's me, mine, or mine? I. You can't. Right? So if a person understands this reality, then that person realizes that there is no permanent self entity to call me, mine, or I. This is all a result of a cause. When the cause is there, the result is there, and when the cause ceases, the result ceases. Okay, so if a person understands this, then that person can abandon this self-identity view. Okay, so Sakkaya Ditthi. Vicikiccha means skeptical doubt, doubt about the path, doubt about the Supreme Buddha, doubt about the Dhamma, doubt about your Dhamma practice. Is this going to work? Is this the right thing? Is this the right teaching? Can this happen? So this doubt, the Supreme Buddha explains, it's a hindrance to Nibbana. What it does is completely hinders your path to Nibbana. So that's the second one. And the third one is Silapata Paramas. Silapata Paramas means wrong ritualistic practices, or rather it's explained as wrong grasp of behavior and observances. So thinking that they are practicing virtue, people observe wrong things. Thinking that they are trying to, virtue means restraining your bodily actions and your verbal action. That's what virtue, sila, means, right? So thinking you're trying to restrain your bodily actions and your verbal actions, people go after many wrong practices and rituals. Some people think that the way to purify your body and speech is to control, is determined by what you eat. Okay, that's the sila of the paramas. That's a wrong grasp of what virtue is. And then some people, they believe that if you only eat grass, that's the way to purify your body and speech. So these are these are rituals, or these are practices that people even today practice. So in this way, there are so many wrong observances that people practice, thinking that it's virtue. Okay, so if a person abandons these three things, Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikiccha, Silapata Paramasa, really what that means is that person has become a Sotapanna disciple, a stream entrant. Without abandoning these three things, you cannot become a stream entrant. So a person cannot become an arahant by abandoning desire, hatred, and delusion unless he becomes a Sotapanna disciple, unless he abandons Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikiccha, and Silabbata Paramasa. Okay? So becoming a stream entrant is the first thing you need to do, and from there you develop the Dhamma path, and then you become an arahant by being free, completely free from all desire, hatred, and delusion. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha further explains that without abandoning these three things, you cannot abandon personal existence view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observances. Okay, so in order to abandon those three, you need to abandon these three factors. And these, what are those three? The Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning unwise consideration, without abandoning following the wrong path, and without abandoning mental sluggishness, you cannot become even a Sotapanna disciple. Okay, so in order to become a Sotapanna disciple, what do you need to abandon? You need to abandon Ayoniso Manasikara. Ayoniso Manasikara means unwise consideration. Unwise consideration means just thinking whatever comes to your mind. You just go on thinking whatever comes to your mind. You are not thinking in line with the Dhamma. Okay, so the way most people think in this world can be said as Ayoniso Manasikara, unwise thinking. Because most people in this world, they are not thinking in line with the Dhamma, right? Wise consideration means always thinking in line with the Dhamma, in accordance to the Supreme Buddha's teaching. Understand? That's what Yoniso Manasikara is. So, in order for a person to become a stream entrant, a Sotapanna disciple, he always needs to think according to the Dhamma. If he is facing a problem, when he is living his everyday life, he should always think according to the Dhamma. So that is, he should always see impermanence in things. And he should always have a mind of loving kindness, abandoning anger, right? And he should see the foulness in his body. So if a person practices meditation, then what that person is really doing is he's practicing this wise consideration, because all these meditations, the Supreme Buddha teaches to think in the right way. So if you take meditation on the foulness of the body, you're thinking the reality. You're thinking the reality. You're not, and if you're practicing impermanence meditation, you're thinking the reality as it is. That's wise consideration. But what most people think in this world is people always think what is impermanent as being permanent. People always think what's foul as being very attractive. And people always think what's non-self as being a self. Okay, so as long as a person has this Ayoniso Manasikara, as long as a person does not think in line with the Dhamma, and as long as a person follows the wrong path, so a person does not understand the path to Nibbana properly, and so he goes and follows many different paths, thinking it leads to Nibbana. Okay, and the third factor is mental sluggishness. Mental sluggishness means your mind is not joyous and fresh. It's very, how do you call it? It's inclined inwards. It's not joyous and fresh. Okay, so if a person has this mental sluggishness, then he doesn't feel like practicing anything wholesome. Okay, but he doesn't feel like practicing meditation. He doesn't feel like developing his Dhamma path. He doesn't even feel like reading a Dhamma book. So mental sluggishness, it's a hindrance. It's a hindrance. Okay. So Buddha explains, without abandoning these three things, that is unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness, you cannot abandon the personal existence view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observances. Okay. And then the Supreme Buddha further explains. So see how deep and clear the Supreme Buddha understands the step-by-step process of a person's development of the Dhamma path, right? How in detail the Supreme Buddha understood how a person can develop this Dhamma path. So the Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning these three things, one is incapable of abandoning unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. Okay, so if you don't abandon these three things, you cannot abandon unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. And what are these three? The Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning muttasati. Muttasati means unmindfulness. You are not mindful. And asampajanya. Asampajanya means lack of clear comprehension. And the third is chetaso vikepam, and your mental distraction. So unless a person abandons unmindfulness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction, that person cannot abandon unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. Okay, so you need to be mindful. Okay, without mindfulness, you can never engage in yoniso manasikara. You cannot engage in wise consideration. Okay, now for you to understand this, if you're someone who's trying to practice the Dhamma, you can really look back into your own life and see, okay, when your mind is completely not mindful about yourself, about your body, about your thoughts, about your feelings, okay, about the Dhamma, then when a defilement comes to your mind, can you recognize that a defilement has come to your mind? No. Okay. Defilements are completely filled in your mind, but you cannot recognize that these defilements are in your mind. And if you can't, and in the same way, when defilements are there in your mind, you're not able to think the Dhamma in order to abandon these defilements. Okay, for example, when you're not mindful about the Dhamma, when you're not mindful about your body, when you're not mindful about feelings, when you're not mindful about your mind, now you're unmindful, and you see someone who's so beautiful, and that view or that look just completely takes your mind away. Okay, so what happens is, quickly, in a moment, in seconds, lust arrives in your mind. Okay? And now you don't have, you're not mindful, you're unmindful, and lust has overcome your mind. And because you're not mindful, you're not able to recognize that there's lust in your mind, and you're not able to realize that this is something that you should abandon. Okay, and you're not able to think of the Dhamma to abandon these defilements. You're not able to recollect about the foulness of the body, but rather you simply give in to your lustful feelings, and then you continue in that path, in the wrong path. Understand? But if you're mindful, okay, now look back into your lives. At a time where you were mindful, if you saw that same person, because you were mindful about your own body, about the bodies of others, because you are mindful about your mind, about the Dhamma, about your feelings, then you quickly you recollect, you quickly are aware that lust has come into your mind. And because you're very well aware, you can quickly abandon that lust by thinking about the foulness of the body. So in order to engage in yoniso manasikara, you need to be mindful. Without that mindfulness, you cannot develop further. Okay? And clear comprehension, what it really means is the wisdom to abandon defilements. That's what sampajana means. Sampajana means is that wisdom, that deep understanding that you need to recognize defilements and abandon them. Okay? And mental distraction. So without, if your mind is completely distracted, then of course, that means you're not mindful. Okay? And that means you don't understand what's going on in your mind, and you don't have the wisdom to understand what's, you don't have the wisdom to abandon defilements. Okay? So without abandoning these three things, this everybody explains, you cannot abandon ayoniso manasikara, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. Okay, so see how connected these things are, these factors are, right? Then the Supreme Buddha explains further. The Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning unmindfulness, lack of comprehension, and mental distractions. Okay, so what are these three? The Supreme Buddha explains lack of desire to see noble ones, lack of desire to hear the Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism. Okay, so if a person does not abandon lack of desire, so if a person does not want to see noble ones, if a person does not want to hear the Dhamma, and if a person always listens to the Dhamma with the goal of criticizing that Dhamma, then he can never gain mindfulness. He can never attain sampajanya. He can never develop the wisdom to abandon defilements, and his mind will always be distracted. Okay, so you can be happy because you have abandoned these three things, right? You have abandoned the lack of desire to see the noble one. That's why. And you have abandoned the desire, the lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma. That is why you're here, because you have the desire to listen to Dhamma, right? So this factor is going to help you to develop further up into all the way up to attaining Nibbana. But if a person does not have these three factors, then he cannot develop further in the ladder. You can think this like a ladder actually, right? The very top is Nibbana. Okay, and now we're kind of halfway down the ladder. Okay, we'll go back up the ladder at the end of describing all of these things. So when you're climbing a ladder, you need to first put your step on the lowest, what do you call that? The lowest bar, you can say, right? And then the next bar, and then the next bar, and then the next bar, and then little by little, gradually you reach the top. Okay, so in this sutta, what the Supreme Buddha is really teaching is those steps that you need to know in order to climb the ladder to Nibbana. Okay, so you're very lucky that you get to hear this Dhamma. So the Supreme Buddha explains, if a person does not have the desire to see noble ones, that is, if a person does not like to see the Buddha or the Mahasangha or those noble ones who teach the Dhamma, and if he lacks the desire to hear this Dhamma, and if he listens, even if he listens with a mind of criticizing. Okay? Some people listen to Dhamma to criticize, to be a critic, not to understand. Okay, so if he listens to the Dhamma to be a critic and criticize the Dhamma, then of course that's what that's what he will get. He will be able to criticize, but he will not be able to understand. So the Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning these three factors, you cannot abandon unmindfulness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. Okay? And then the Supreme Buddha further explains, without abandoning these three factors, you cannot abandon lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism. Okay, so if you have not abandoned these factors, you cannot abandon the factors above. And what are these three? They are restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. Okay, what are those three things? Restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. So restlessness means your mind there's no concentration of your mind. Your mind is always jumping from one thought to another, right? If a person has a restless mind, can he listen to the Dhamma? He can't. If he has a restless mind, can he even read a book? No, nothing that he reads will go into his mind. Right? So person needs to have a certain calmness in his mind in order to listen to the Dhamma. With a restless mind, you cannot listen to the Dhamma. So you see how even listening to the Dhamma makes you calm the mind. Now, if your minds were completely restless, you won't be sitting there like this, and you won't be able to understand what I'm saying. And your mind won't incline towards sitting down and listening if your mind was restless. You need to have a certain calmness in your mind in this moment in order for you to listen to what I'm saying. Okay, right? So the Supreme Buddha explains, if a person does not abandon restlessness, non-restraint means he does not control his sense faculties. He does not control his eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the body and the mind. Okay, what that means is, when he sees some things, he does not control his mind. When he sees some things from his eyes, he lets desire arouse in his mind, or he lets resentment arouse in his mind. He does not control. When he hears something, he lets what he hears arouse desire or lust within him. He lets what he hears arouse resentment towards himself. He does not control his ear. Understand? You need to. So, for example, when you see someone who's very, very pretty or beautiful, lustful thoughts come into your mind. That means you did not control your eye. When you hear someone blaming you, quickly you angry thoughts arouse in your mind. Understand? So that's called not restraining your six sense faculties. So without having that restrainment, the Supreme Buddha explains, you cannot develop the above three factors. And the third factor is immorality. Immorality means not protecting the precepts. So if you're someone who killed, if you're someone who steals, if you're someone who engaged in sexual misconduct, if you're someone who lies, and if you're someone who drinks and takes drinks and drugs, then the Supreme Buddha explains you cannot abandon those above three factors, which are unmindfulness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. Okay, so now we're little by little coming to the base. So you can be happy that if a person, if you have a calm mind, if you have a calm mind, if you have restrained your sense faculties, and if you are moral, that is, if you protect the 5 precepts, then you have the factors that you need in order to have the desire to see noble ones, in order to have the desire to listen to the Dhamma, in order to listen to the Dhamma without having a mind of criticism. Okay, so those are the 3 factors. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, a person cannot abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality, that is breaking the precepts, without having abandoned these 3 things. Okay, so in order to not be restless, in order to control your sense faculties, and in order to be moral, that is, in order to practice the precepts by controlling your bodily actions and your verbal actions, you need to abandon these 3 things. What are those 3? The Supreme Buddha explains that is lack of faith. Okay, lack of faith means asaddha. Asaddha means not having confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Okay, asaddha. And the second one is not having the ability to understand what's being said. Okay, not having the ability to understand what's being said. It's known as avadanyutam. Okay, when you're taught something, you don't have that ability to understand. So when you're taught the Dhamma, you're not able to understand what's being said. And the third factor is laziness. If you're lazy, if you don't make an effort to practice what is good. See, lazy people can never become successful even in the material life, right? So how can you develop the transcendental or the worldly life, right? So the Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning these 3 factors, which is lack of confidence in the triple gem and not understanding what's being said, what's being taught, and laziness, a person cannot abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. Okay. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning these 3 things, one cannot abandon lack of confidence, not being able to understand the Dhamma, and laziness. And these 3 are disrespect. Say disrespect. Disrespect means not respecting those worthy of respect. So if a person does not have this, he cannot go any further. He cannot go up in the ladder. Disrespect means not respecting those worthy of respect. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha is a supreme being worthy of respect. So if you don't have respect, the Sangha are worthy of respect, worthy of honor, right? And when you go to a Chaitya, when you go to a Bodhi tree, they are worthy of respect. You need to respect. A stupa, when you see a stupa, you should worship. When you see a Bodhi tree, you should worship. You should have that respect within you, right? So without having respect for those who are worthy of respect, the Supreme Buddha explains, you cannot go any further up in the ladder to Nibbana. And that's the first factor. And then the second factor is being disobedient. If you're someone who's disobedient, you're someone who's difficult to correct. When someone gives you an advice, you don't become obedient. So if you have that quality, then the Supreme Buddha explains you cannot develop further in the Dhamma path. And the third is bad friendship, Papa Mitta, associating with Papa Mittas, bad friends. Okay, Papa Mittas means who those who do not practice this Dhamma, those who are not virtuous. So if you associate with people who are not virtuous, who have wrong views in life, and those who do not listen to the Dhamma, who do not have a good understanding about the Dhamma, then they can they can manipulate you into going in the wrong path. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha explains, if you're disrespectful, okay, if you don't honor those worthy of honor, and if you're not obedient, if you're not obedient, if you're difficult to correct, the Supreme Buddha explains, and if you associate with wrong people without abandoning these three factors, you cannot gain confidence in the Supreme Buddha, and you cannot understand what's being taught to you, and you cannot abandon laziness. Okay? And then the Supreme Buddha finally explains, because without abandoning these three factors, you cannot abandon disrespect, being disrespectful, being disobedient, and associating with bad friends. And that is, if you don't abandon if you don't abandon moral shamelessness and if you don't abandon hiri, that is not having shame of doing wrong things. That's what it really means. Moral shame means not having shame towards doing wrong things. So you're not ashamed of engaging in sexual misconduct. You're not ashamed of lying. You're not ashamed of killing. You're not ashamed of drinking. Okay, so if you don't have the shame of doing wrong things, and moral fear, if you don't fear doing wrong things, the way you get fear for doing wrong things is when you get to know the result of doing those wrong things, right? The Supreme Buddha explains, if you kill, if you steal, if you engage in sexual misconduct, if you lie, if you do these wrong things, then in your next life you will have to suffer in hell. You will have to be reborn in the ghost world. You will have to be reborn in the animal world. So if a person does not believe this, then he does not have fear of doing wrong things. The Supreme Buddha explains, without abandoning this fear of doing wrong things and heedlessness. Heedlessness means pamado. Pamado means you're not diligent. You're not diligent in doing wholesome things. You're just doing the ordinary things that the ordinary person does. You don't try to collect any merit in your life. You don't think of afterlife. Your entire life you learn, you get a job, you earn money, and then you drink and you eat. You're just living the ordinary life that the ordinary person is living. You don't make an effort to learn the Dhamma. You don't make an effort to collect merit into your life. You don't make an effort to think about an afterlife, to understand the reality of life. You're living heedlessly. So if a person does not abandon these three things, that is moral shame, moral fear, and heedlessness, then he cannot abandon disrespect, disobedience, and associating with bad friends. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha explains this is the start. This is the start of the chain, or this is the start of the ladder. Okay, the Supreme Buddha explains, bhikkhus, one who is morally shameless and morally reckless is heedless. Okay, so if a person does not have any shame of doing wrong things, and if he does not have any fear of doing wrong things, he is heedless. He is living the ordinary life. One who is heedless is incapable of abandoning disrespect, being difficult to correct, and bad friendship. So if he is just doing the ordinary things without making an effort to do the right thing and abandon wrong things, then he is incapable of abandoning disrespect. So he does not have respect for noble ones. Right? Because he does not care about an afterlife, he does not care about, he does not have any fear of being reborn in a bad world, right? Is incapable of abandoning disrespect, and he is very difficult to correct. He is not obedient. When someone advises to and tries to show him the right path, he does not become obedient. And he continues to associate with bad friends. Okay, Papa Miktas. He does not associate with noble friends who protect virtue, who collect merit, who tries to practice Dhamma. His friends are all Papa Miktas. One who has bad friends is incapable of abandoning lack of faith, not understanding what's being said, and laziness. Okay, so a person who has a person who associates with Papa Miktas cannot abandon lack of faith. That means he cannot ever gain faith, and he cannot ever understand what's being taught, and he's always lazy. And one who is lazy is incapable of abandoning restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. Okay, a lazy person, he is always restless. He does not control his sense faculties, and he does not practice precepts. He does not control his body and speech. One who is immoral is incapable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism. So an immoral person, he doesn't want to see noble ones. He doesn't want to see the Buddha or the Mahasangha. He doesn't want to listen to the Dhamma, right? Why would he want? Because he doesn't have any understanding of an afterlife. So why would he want? See how step by step you're going completely in the wrong way, right? Then the Sabbath explains, one who is immoral one who has a mind bent on criticism. So one who listens to the Dhamma, even if he listens to Dhamma, he listens with the intention of criticizing the Dhamma. One who has a mind bent on criticism is incapable of abandoning unmindfulness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. Okay, so if he listens to the Dhamma with the intention of criticizing the Dhamma, then he can never gain mindfulness. He can never gain mindfulness on the Dhamma. He can never gain sampajanya. He can never gain the wisdom that's required to abandon defilements. And his mind is always distracted. Okay. Then the Srimad explains, one who is mentally distracted is incapable of abandoning unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. Okay. And then one who is mentally sluggish is incapable of abandoning personal existence view. So if a person's mind is sluggish, it's not joyful, it's not fresh, and it's not inclining towards practicing wholesome things, then the Supreme Buddha explains he's incapable of abandoning Sakkaya Ditthi, personal existence view, Vicikiccha, doubt, and Silabbata Paramasa, wrong grasp of behavior and observances. One who has doubt is incapable of abandoning lust, hatred, and delusion. Okay. So if a person doubts the Supreme Buddha, if a person doubts this Dhamma, the teaching, if a person doubts the path to Nibbana, then the Supreme Buddha explains that person cannot abandon lust, hatred, and delusion. And without having abandoned lust, hatred, and delusion, one is incapable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. Okay, so we came back to the top. Okay, so this is only half of the sutta, and then in the other half, what the Supreme Buddha teaches is in the same way the opposite. That is, if a person abandons these three things, that person is able to abandon these three things. So it's the same factors of three, but the Supreme Buddha explains in the positive way. So in the previous way, we talked about if a person does not abandon these three things, that person cannot abandon these three things, right? But in the next half, the Supreme Buddha teaches, because if a person is capable of abandoning these three things, that person can abandon birth, old age, and death. And what are those three? Lust, hatred, and delusion. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, if a person can abandon these three things, that person can abandon lust, hatred, and delusion. And that is, if a person abandons personal existence view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observances, that person can abandon birth, lust, hatred, and delusion. In this way, the Supreme Buddha teaches all the way until moral shame, moral recklessness, and heedlessness. Because we don't have a lot of time, I summarized it in that way. So if a person abandons lust, hatred, and delusion, that person can abandon birth, old age, and death. If a person can abandon personal existence view, doubt, and wrong observances, that person can abandon lust, hatred, and delusion. If a person can abandon unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness, that person can abandon personal existence view, doubt, and wrong observances. And if a person can abandon unmindfulness and lack of clear comprehension and mental distraction, that person can abandon unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. And if a person can abandon the lack of desire to see noble ones, the lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism, that person can abandon unmindfulness and lack of clear comprehension and mental distraction. And if a person can abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality, that person can abandon lack of desire to see noble ones, a lack of desire to hear the Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism. And if a person can abandon lack of faith and inability to understand what's being said and laziness, that person can abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. And if a person can abandon disrespect, being difficult to correct, and bad friendship, that person can abandon lack of faith, inability to understand what's being said, and laziness. And if a person can abandon moral shame, moral fear, and moral shame, moral fear, and heedlessness, then that person can abandon disrespect, being difficult to correct, and bad friendship. And the Supreme Buddha explains, because one who has a sense of moral shame and moral dread is heedful. So if a person has fear of doing wrong things, if a person is ashamed of doing wrong things, he's heedful. He tries to practice the right thing, and he's trying to practice wholesome thing. One who is heedful is capable of abandoning disrespect, being difficult to speak to, obedient, and bad friendship. Okay, so if you're heedful, then you respect those worthy of respect, and you become obedient to the noble one's advice, and you associate with kalyana mittas. And those who have good friends is capable of abandoning lack of faith, not being able to understand what's being said, and laziness. If you associate with kalyana mittas, then you will gain confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. And you will be able to abandon laziness. And one who is not lazy is able to abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. And one who is virtuous is capable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones. So once you become virtuous, you like to see virtuous ones. Okay? And lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and mind bent on criticism. And one whose mind is not bent on criticism is capable of abandoning unmindfulness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. And one who has an undistracted mind is capable of abandoning unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. And one who has an unsluggish mind is capable of abandoning personal existence view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observances. And one without doubt, one who does not doubt the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, is capable of abandoning lust, hatred, and delusion. Having abandoned lust, hatred, and delusion, one is capable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. Okay. So in this beautiful sutta, we learn the step-by-step process that we need to practice and what we need to abandon in order to completely abandon lust, hatred, and delusion and be free from birth, old age, and death. So may this beautiful sutta help all of us to develop the Dhamma path and abandon these factors and help us to abandon lust, hatred, and delusion and be free from birth, old age, and death in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so I know it's a lot, but if you take some time and try to analyze and contemplate on this beautiful teaching, you will be able to see how each of these things are connected, and you can really understand how when you abandon these three factors, how you will be able to abandon the above three factors. And if you abandon those three factors, how you will be able to abandon the above three factors. And you get a clear understanding of how to climb the ladder to Nibbana. Okay.